meeting of the Cambridgeshire Police and Crime Panel for the 2024-25 municipal year. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of a chairman. So I'll open to a chairperson. Yeah, sorry. So I'll open to any nominations. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. I'm happy to nominate Claire George.
Okay. Are there any others? Oh, that's fairly easy then. Congratulations, Councillor. Sorry, not Councillor, Claire.
I'm not known for my technical expertise. Those of you that have been with me for the last year, thank you very much for your continuing support. We will now move to the second item, which is election of Vice Chair. Do I have any nominations, please? Somebody. Going to be a bit lonely. Please? If there's somebody not here, we could nobble. That's what we did last time. Sorry? I can nominate. Well, I'd rather somebody felt that they could volunteer, really. I'd better use that. No, use that. Would you happily do that? I think Councillor Gowing might be nominating. Would that be okay, sir? I do. Thank you very much. Do we have any other? No, could I have a seconder, please, for Councillor Gowing? Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Leeming. Do I have any?
Someone put somebody else forward, but didn't. What was they?
Sorry, are there any other nominations? Any other nominations for Vice Chair? I didn't hear that. Okay, in his absence.
No, you can't, Katie,
Oh.
because you're not able to. Sorry, Katie's not.
Oh.
Cole's can't.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
I'd nominate Jason McNally.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Can I have a seconder for that nomination, please? Okay. In which case, I think we're going to confirm Councillor Gowing as Vice Chair. Am I getting the process right? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much for your support, Councillor Gowing. I'm going to give you all the tricky jobs. Really? No, not really. Okay. So, thank you very much, Councillor Gowing. You're now duly appointed as Vice Chair for the municipal year 24-25. We'll move to item number 3, apologies for absence. Pippa, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
There are 3 apologies for absence received from Councillors Cameron Holloway, Jason McNally and Marge Butel.
Thank you very much. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? If so, if they could raise their hand now, that would be really helpful. Councillor Fox?
I'm not sure if I have to record this, but I'm a retired police officer and I get a police pension, but I don't think it comes into it, really.
Thank you very much, sir. Duly noted. Anybody else have any interest, pecuniary interest to declare? I'm really sorry I can't see your label and you're a new, I'm really sorry. Councillor Kerr?
My husband's a retired police officer too, so we get a pension.
Thank you very much. Any other disclosable interests? No? Thank you very much. Duly recorded, Pippa. Thank you. Item number 5 then, the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March 2024. Any panel members happy to agree those minutes? Are there any issues? We picked up 1 or 2 minor admin and spelling issues. Councillor Bradnam?
Sorry, this isn't a matter of accuracy. Sorry, it's a matter of... I can find my comments.
If we could we just do accuracy first?
Yep.
And then we'll come back to comments. Are there any matters of accuracy? No? Okay, so beyond the 2 spelling ones that we picked out already. Thank you very much. In terms of comments on the minutes of the meeting?
Okay, so there was two of the items were delayed. That's right. It was the guidance about how to handle complaints and rules of procedure, and it was noted at that meeting that they would be deferred and brought to another meeting. That was under items 8 and 9.
Yep.
And I just wanted to know when they'll be brought to the panel.
The intention is we will bring those back to the November panel, just because we've had quite a lot of personnel changes. We've got a little bit more work to do yet, so they'll come back to November. Any other comments? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. There were two public questions, and it said that the correspondents would receive a written answer, and I wondered whether that could be circulated, please, and made public.
Absolutely. We'll make sure that happens. Yes. Thank you very much. Any other comments on the minutes? So those people that were present at the meeting in March, and I personally wasn't, of those people that were present, are you happy that we sign those in a true and accurate record? Thank you very much. We'll do that then. Okay, item number 6, review actions and recommendations from the previous meeting. Commissioner, is there anything else that you wish to report back on that came out of the last meeting held in March?
Thank you, Chair. The only thing that came from the last meeting was an action from Councillor Bradnam in relation to the pill assessment, which is covered in the agenda.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So we will move to item number 7, public questions. Pippa, do we have any public questions? Have we received any public questions?
None have been received.
Okay, no public questions received. Thank you very much. So we will move on then to item number 8, Police and Crime Commissioner's Annual Report for 2023-2024. Commissioner, would you like to present your report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. Perhaps before I do so, a request, please. Whilst we're talking about the annual report, which is a report on the progress of the Police and Crime Plan, a statutory responsibility of mine, having been elected in May, is to produce another one, a new one, which we are currently consulting on. And there is a survey on my website, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So far, I think it's going fairly well. We've had quite a few responses. We've got onto social media. I've been on the radio. But a request, any way that through your organisations that this can be pushed, the survey, the more people that respond, the better, particularly aimed at some of the more diverse communities as well. But if you could bear that in mind, I would be very grateful. Back to the annual report. You will probably, those that have been around for a little while on this panel, will note that it follows the same style as previous reports, and indeed the Police and Crime Plan, and that's on purpose. I want to keep this straightforward and accessible. That's why there's not lots and lots of graphs, charts and small print. It's accessible because it's a public-facing document. And I think it's fair to say that throughout the past 3 or so years, we've been reporting on this regularly, and there is a wealth, a plethora of further documents, information behind this, both on the PCC website and on the Constabulary website. So if I may, Chair, what I'll do is I'll just go through the 5 areas of the Police and Crime Plan, just a very brief summary as it has been circulated. Firstly, the Police and Crime Plan was split into 5 distinct pillars, but all complementing each other. The very first one was around putting communities first. And this is about listening to local residents, ensuring that both the police and partners, where we can, are acting on their concerns. Probably one of the biggest concerns, and I know there are many councillors in the room who have probably spoken to lots of residents, knocked on lots of doors. One of the biggest concerns is around the number of police and visibility. I am pleased to report that the constabulary now has record number of police officers. That is a fact. The establishment is at 1,732. I believe they're running slightly over that to keep to the establishment, but that is the establishment as part of the National Police Uplift Programme. Now, some will say that is just putting back those police officers that were lost in austerity, and nationally, I can't argue with that, but that's not the same locally. That is significantly more police officers than we've had before in Cambridgeshire. Then, of course, the question is, well, we've had significant population growth. That is true. However, even taking that into account, we have record numbers of police. One of the things I'm really proud of in the past 3 years, and it's taken some time to get to the end point, but all 6 areas have a community safety partnership. In Peterborough, it's the Peterborough Safety Partnership. Now, that's a statutory responsibility, and it's a statutory responsibility of local authority, police, fire, probation, and others as well. And I think it's fair to say that across the nation, the effectiveness of community safety partnerships has been variable. That's probably a kind way of putting it. And there has been a review conducted by the Home Office as well. I'm pleased to say that review actually spoke to us because we were seen to be a sort of an outlier in relation to good practice. And all of our 6 community safety partnerships are now aligned. They all receive a funded post from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. This is a problem-solving post because this is where the gap was. Often these are made up of volunteers, people with busy day jobs. But these posts are now in place. We've got some great people across the partnerships who have access to the police, to the local authority and other partners. And recently we had a meeting with the chairs of the CSPs where we looked at some of the really fantastic work that is being driven across the county. And I might add, this isn't just about high harm. You know, we would all have heard county lines, modern day slavery, really significant, important areas of work. But the bit that I was always getting on speaking to residents, well, what about the rest of it? You know, what some people might term as low level. I don't think there's anything such thing as low level, but, you know, things like fly tipping, you know, here in Peterborough and across the county, you know, these are concerns. You know, the community safety partnerships are now actively running projects dealing with fly tipping and some real success there as well. I've been particularly focused, and we'll talk about this in a moment, on early intervention, our young people, and what we can do to keep our young people out of trouble. And they've been doing some fantastic work there as well. But there are some other things around putting communities first. When I first came into office, I recall bike theft across the county. Now, it's not high harm, it's not high risk, but any one of us who had a bike stolen knows just how annoying, how painful, and actually in some cases, you know, people can't get to work, college, etc. But my biggest issue was this. In Cambridge, which was known as the bike theft capital of the country, you know, there was a significant movement on social media. Thousands and thousands of people saying that the police aren't doing anything about it. We have no confidence in the police to do anything about it. Now, that is significant because that's about trust and confidence. That was in my police and crime plan. Really pleased to announce that across the county, bike crime is down. Bike theft is down 54%, which is quite significant. And that's because of a partnership approach, which I lent into as well. But those are sort of some of the local things, not just the big high-end, high-harm, high-risk, which we can also report on in a moment. Crime prevention. It's one of those Pelian principles for those police officers, ex-police officers in the room, always like to get a Pelian principle in. And this is about actually the true success of policing and law enforcement is the lack of crime. And I truly sign up to that. We've been really successful in the past year with our Safer Streets 5 bid. So this is the government pot of money that for the past few years we've been successful in every round, but we probably punched above our weight this time round in what we got from the Home Office, and these are funded projects across the county. The Home Office are very clear with their grant agreements. They've got to be in those areas of more deprivation and high crime. We therefore tend to find that many of the projects will go to Peterborough or Cambridge, but I pushed very hard, and we also got monies out to Wisbeach, St Neots and Huntingdon as well, and some projects that have been run there. A couple of areas in relation to crime prevention. There is now new legislation, a duty to cooperate around tackling serious violence. And this is monitored at my High Harms Board, which I chair, which is a strategic board of those that you would imagine from across the county. I'm particularly pleased with some of the progress around tackling serious violence. So this is about knife crime, gun crime, county lines, and generally it is driven by drugs, as we all know here. And what particularly worries me around knife crime is our young people. And what particularly worries me about our young people is that, yeah, some of these will be involved in gangs, they will be vulnerable, they will be exploited, we need to deal with that. But some of these are just ordinary kids in our schools that are carrying knives. And these are life-changing decisions. So this is why I'm really focused on tackling knife crime. And as a result of that, we've seen knife crime go down significantly in our county, bucking a bit of a national trend there. Reported knife crime, so this is police reports, is significantly down, but probably the best figure, which is particularly pleasing, is the hospital admissions, the amount of people going into hospital presenting with knife injury wounds. That's down 54%. So, you know, that's half probably of young kids being stabbed of what we did have. So, you know, that's some really great work. I'd like to take all the credit, but clearly we've got some great partnerships going on out there, some really great youth work going on, some really good projects across the county by all of our partners. Supporting victims and witnesses is a statutory responsibility, but even if it wasn't, it would be high up on anybody's agenda, I would suggest. I'll go back to crime prevention. You know, I think we'd all prefer to be in a position where we aren't supporting victims, because that's the ambition here, is that we drive down crime, and the prevention bit is so important. But I think we do pretty well here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and I say that because others look at our model. We have a different model than many other areas with our victims and witness hub, and I think they do some brilliant work. Since 2021, since I came into this post, around £21.5 million of investment has been made through my office, and this has played an integral part in commissioning support services for victims and witnesses of crime. I'm particularly proud around some of the more specialised support, for example, around domestic abuse and sexual violence. We bid into Ministry of Justice. We were able to get, you know, some significant funding for that. My concern is this, like everything, and you'll be used to this in your roles, is the cliff edge funding that is coming to the end next March. I do hope that this government will continue to fund the supporting victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence, and I will certainly be lobbying for that. You know, just one example here, I think we invest in, I really hope that's not mine, I'm so sorry. We are investing in some of the services to support those victims of sexual violence. One of those, which I think is that Cambridge Rape Crisis, I'm not sure, I think it's Cambridge Rape Crisis, have seen 854 people in the past period. So that's 854 people that have received support that would never have done before. I could talk around supporting victims and witnesses for a very long time, but I will move on, and if there are any questions, please do come back to me. Robust enforcement, so this is about holding the police to account. I don't enforce the law, the constabulary do, and I hold the chief constable to account for doing just that. I too am an ex-police officer. I don't have to declare that interest given my role now, but I am an ex-police officer, and frankly, I fully support the police in using all the tools in the toolbox to deal with crime, because that's what we as citizens and residents want. We want the police, yes, to prevent crime. That is a primary focus. But then when it does occur, to robustly enforce the law. So what I can say over the past period, and these are baseline figures to 2019. I think that will change soon, but the reason they're baselined is that was pre-COVID. COVID completely skewed any figures and wouldn't make sense to anything we're monitoring now. But also, it's probably a good benchmark of my tenure, because I came in at the end of COVID, so this is probably the best benchmark of where we were before I started in this role. So in these figures, neighbourhood crime is down by 31%. So that's crimes that include burglary, robbery, theft from person, etc. Of particular interest to me, residential burglaries are down 38%, and that's significant. I did ask the Chief Constable why. I mean, I think the police do a reasonable job arresting and dealing with burglars because it is an abhorrent crime, so they should. I also feel potentially it's not the crime of choice as it used to be. You know, it's high risk and low value most of the time. Personal robbery offences are down. Theft from person offences are down. I've talked about bike theft. Incidents of antisocial behaviour are actually down by 27% as well. I'm very clear. We know that there's more to do, and there will be a sharp focus on dealing with antisocial behaviour in the police and crime plan. Talked about serious offences involving a sharp weapon, but also going back to the communities section, rural crime. We have seen a drop in rural crime, particularly around hair coursing, and for those in rural communities, they will know what a significant impact this abhorrent crime has. This isn't just about people chasing hares with dogs. This has a significant impact on our communities. And I'm quite happy to say that the people who are carrying out these activities are quite often involved in serious organised criminality as well. That's my professional judgment, and I will stick with it. Hair coursing is down massively, and that's as a result of we've probably got the best rural crime team in the country, and some great joined up work with our surrounding forces, and the fact that we enforce the legislation. We seize dogs and we take them to court under the new legislation that we have. Last but not least, ethical policing. So this is about trust and confidence in our police. Talking about the peer inspection, yes, there were two areas, significant areas of improvement, but this is the area where the constabulary was seen as being outstanding. And in fact, you know, I know that a lot of other constabularies have come to them as well. And this is really important to me, really, really important, particularly as an ex-police officer. We must have trust and confidence in our police. There have been a number of events, national events. We saw one recently as well. I won't make any comment to any of those individual events that have occurred. But the police, the public deserve to be able to trust and have confidence in their police. Interestingly for me, that although we have had some of those national abhorrent incidents, so things like vetting has been improved, the discipline regulations and how that we're looking at those. You know, this is about recruiting the right people and ensuring we swiftly remove those people that aren't suited or suitable in policing. But just a couple of other things I'd like to mention as well, the use of volunteers around the scrutiny panels that we have, and our custody visitors, independent custody visitors. These are people who give up their time to go into the cells to make sure detainees are being appropriately cared for, and indeed that the police officers are also being appropriately cared for. They have a good relationship now with the constabulary, although challenging, and they've recently received the gold standard in independent custody visiting, which is fantastic, and particularly thanks to Shona McKenzie in my office for leading in that area. So, Chair, that's a very quick whiz through of the annual report. I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, and thank you very much to the Police and Crime Commissioner for running through the report. The question I wanted to ask was, I think it's a bit difficult to know what element it comes under, but perhaps robust enforcement. It comes under what, the question is, are you satisfied that the Chief Constable's approach to drug crime? I am very aware that in some circumstances, I suspect, and forgive me if I'm wrong in this, but I suspect it might be associated with both gangs, but also delivery drivers using e-scooters and food delivery drivers. So I just wondered whether you were satisfied with the Chief Constable's approach to that, because it's obviously such an antisocial, it causes a whole culture of different behaviours and things which are not helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think I mentioned this before. I'm actually the Senior Responsible Officer for implementation of the outgoing government now, but it's still a government strategy, Harm to Hope, and this is the National Drug Strategy. And with that came some fairly significant funding as well. And there are 3 areas of focus, and I'll mention this and then come back to your specific point. There are 3 areas of focus in the drug strategy. And interestingly, it was driven by the Home Office rather than Health or Ministry of Justice, and this was about reducing crime. But actually the outcomes are far more so than reducing crime. This is about, you know, well-being, health, economy, etc. But these are the 3 areas. Dealing with addiction. So this is people who are addicted to drugs. There's some fantastic work going on. We've got some of the best services in the country here. We've got some brilliant people dealing with this. And at the moment, anybody who requires or needs treatment, there is provision for it across this county. And then, of course, there's other things going on within custody blocks where there's drug testing on arrest, etc. And those people can be put into services, i.e. stop them from taking drugs, stop them from committing crime. The second bit is demand. I'll come back to that. The third bit is enforcement. So am I satisfied at the high harm dealing with serious organised criminality? Yes. There has been some fantastic results by the Constabulary, by the Eastern Region Serious Organised Crime Unit, and by the National Crime Agency. It is a strategic policing requirement, it is a national threat, and there is a lot of work going on around that. And then actually at community level as well, we see here in Peterborough that the clear here, the project that is going on in relation to tackling, you know, county lines, etc. But actually this is the biggest area, it's around demand. So am I satisfied that the Constabulary are dealing with county lines, etc., drug supply? Yes, I am, as best they can with their resources and the national picture. The demand bit is the worrying bit, though, because actually we tend to think that this is all about, you know, drug gangs, drug addicts, crime. Actually, the biggest users of drugs, and they called it recreational drugs. How you can call anything recreational that is a drug, I don't know. But these are people who go to work, who go to school. On a Friday night, they might buy their cocaine or smoke cannabis, etc. And probably not realising there's blood on their hands. If we can deal with that demand, and that's not a policing issue, you know, that's a society issue. That's got to be a joined up approach of dealing with demand. And once again, we probably need to get in young and early, because I think there is a difference. And I think, John, you'd probably see this as well. I mean, I walk around Peterborough and sometimes, you know, cannabis smoking is blatant. You know, that offends me personally. You know, it offends me, not least of which it's against the law. And I would like to see more enforcement around recreational drug use. But let's be clear about my role. You know, I hold the Chief Constable to account. It's for the Chief Constable to deploy resources, and they're operationally independent. And this isn't a Cambridgeshire thing, this is across the country. But I do think that there is a requirement. And actually, when we talk about cannabis, there are arguments, I know, about legalisation and decriminalisation and then safe spaces for taking drugs. I'll put it on record, I am not in favour of safe places for taking drugs. It's a crime. We shouldn't be encouraging that. We should be encouraging dealing with addictions and health, inequalities, etc. I could go on for a long time because obviously drugs drives many of our woes. But I know that we're doing some good work here in this county.
Sorry, if you could address the matter, do you think that the proliferation of food delivery companies has a part to play in that?
I think that given the business models of drug suppliers, they will use any means available. Yes, I'm aware of what you're talking about, but actually, even without that, they will have their mechanisms of getting drugs to you. And actually, I'm informed that you can probably get them quicker than you can get a pizza in any case. So, you know, that's the reality. These people are very agile in their business model. And what policing and law enforcement need to do is take down their business model. That's the key goal.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
There we go. I should learn it by now, shouldn't I? So thank you. So firstly, this is a really comprehensive report, so thank you. And you clearly know your stuff, which is actually really refreshing, so you're not just reading it off, so which is very good. My question is, and this won't come as a shock to you, because I know I've raised this for you personally, the constabulary accessibility part, where it sits there and says 101 calls are answered within 10 seconds, which is actually better than the previous year, which was 20 seconds. So I guess what I want to know is that the triage? Is that where you literally phone up and say, and they say, where do you want to be sent, like Cambridgeshire, whatever? And that's then classed as the 10 seconds? Because I have personally used 101 quite often in the circles that I support in, and it's not 10 seconds is not the average time that I'm waiting. So could we have some clarification on that, please?
I had this very conversation with the Chief Constable, I think it was last Friday, because actually it goes into the PIL assessment as well of responding to the public. And actually, if, you know, I'm very happy and open to say that in my tenure, this has probably been the most challenging area in holding the constabulary to account. I'm not alone. Once again, the 101 is a national problem. And where I do have some sympathy for the Chief Constable and policing is that demand has gone through the roof. Demand tonight, the 3 nines and 101 is far more significant than it's ever been. I'm informed, and I suppose it's obvious really, one of the reasons is that we talk about accessibility. Everyone now carries mobile phones, and it's actually far easier. Whereas before you had to walk into a police station and wait in a long queue, you know, people can contact the police. And I say that because crime overall since 2010 has gone down by 50%. We do know, though, that the police are the emergency service of last resort. You know, when everybody else has gone home, they ring the police. You know, and that's the reality. But there is some work going on there about the right care, right person. So the answer to your question is, my understanding is that is the initial pickup of a call. And it is the triage that's the problem piece. And one of the biggest problems is understanding the data. At the moment, we've got a very old telephony system that is being replaced. Hopefully with that, there will be a much better data picture as to the pinch points in. It's getting better. We know the data that I have and the conversations with the Chief Constable. So, for example, answering 3 nines now is really good. Answering the 101, yeah, it's happening, but I'm completely with you because I too have rung 101 and had a shocking experience. I am completely with you that it's actually that triage part and that next bit. There's lots of work that's ongoing, and I will happily come back at a later stage and report on this, but yeah, it's the pickup.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So when we did the walk around to the 101, the control station, it sat there and said that we, Cambridgeshire, pick up a lot of out-of-area calls because we're really quite good. Our call handlers are quite good. Isn't it about time that we stop doing that? If our call waiting times are hitting 20, 30, 40 minutes sometimes, and they are hitting that time when people are phoning 101, why are we taking on other people's work when we're obviously not doing our residents a service?
So that's a good point. Actually, the amount of calls taken from other forces has gone down significantly. Actually, the reason behind that, and there was intervention by both the Chief Constable and I, was there was a particular force not very far from here who had problems in their control room, and we were taking a lot of their 3 nines. The problem with that is that there is a national agreement, and it will always happen, where if you ring 999 and your local constabulary or force is really busy, and it could be because there's a very serious incident, it will be routed elsewhere, and that's quite right and proper. You know, I get your point, let's look after our own, but at the end of the day, you know, I think we would all accept that, you know, if someone in Bedfordshire, don't mention Bedfordshire, if someone in Bedfordshire, you know, needed the police really urgently, then someone should be picking up the phone. I don't think there's any issues around that, and that is specific to 39s. That's not 101. I would have an issue if it was 101, but it's just the 39s, and I think we're okay now.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Commissioner. Just wanted to touch on ethical policing. I know in your verbal update you mentioned that there have been, over the last couple of years, few years, some really big incidents that have hit headline news, but also some smaller that hit regional news as well, about police misconduct and complaints that have been going in as a result. My concern is around, do residents feel like they're able to come to you or to the police to complain? Do they feel heard? Do they feel like the process is being followed, that they're welcomed to make a complaint? I know a few cases where people don't feel that way, and I've had to encourage them to do so. So my question is, what are you doing in your role as Police and Crime Commissioner within your office to encourage people and to make people feel like that they can complain and that they can raise these concerns with you and with the constabulary? And how are you holding the Chief Constable to account to do the same within his organisation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, that's a good question. I'll answer it in two parts. I think we're talking a little bit around integrity and assurance in a paper later on. Jack could probably talk all day about complaints reviews, which is a specific function of my office. But just on a personal basis, I talk to people. And anyone who has been in policing, actually, the art of policing is generally talking to people. So quite often we have people that are, you know, feel that they've been let down, something's gone wrong. I don't turn people down. I will pick up the phone or have a conversation with myself or people in the office, and then if necessary they're routed into the appropriate channels. You know, so often you find actually a conversation, and then the conversation with another person will resolve it. So the constabulary does have a complaints resolution team. That's actually a team of quite experienced officers who do just that. They talk to people with concerns. So that's the very first part of the process before formalising complaints. I don't have the figures in front of me, but that's actually quite successful normally in resolving issues, because quite often the police haven't done a good job. Simple as that. So, you know, go back and say, well, let's recover this. The next bit, obviously, around complaints is a very well-known and trodden procedure around that. And in fact, my office, and this is new legislation, which was brought in a few years ago, has a role within that as well. So we can review complaints as well. I think a specific question is around the trust and confidence in policing. So can I come forward to police? I'm glad you, and I would always encourage residents and, you know, people, leaders, local leaders like yourself, you know, if people feel that they have not received the service they should have done, they must and should complain. I am reasonably confident from all the assurance mechanisms that I have in place that they will be listened to. Clearly there is, you know, there's statutory roles here for in relation to police regulations, and there needs to be process, and sometimes it takes a long time. That's the reality of it. But, you know, directly answering your question, I understand that concern from some people, but I would wholly encourage people to come forward. I think it can be shown some really good examples of policing, and actually some of those national events of abhorrent behaviour by individual police officers. Yes, there's a wider cultural issue, but let's not forget as well, it was actually the police who brought them to justice as well. You know, so it's certainly an important area for me, and it's one that, you know, we pay a lot of attention to.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Leamy.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Police and Crime Commissioner, for your report. It's excellent news on the knife crime statistics particularly. Thank you. I have a question about ethical policing again. On the 20th of March, there was an article in the Hunts Post newspaper, which was a Freedom of Information request, which found out that, looking back over historical data over 7 years, there were 46 officers investigated for misconduct in the force. 9 officers were subject to disciplinary proceedings and 3 were subject to management action. I understand that this is a small proportion of a disciplined force, but I wanted to, I was also reassured by your earlier comments, but I wanted to ask you what you've done to assure yourself that the Chief Constable is working on areas such as vetting, particularly given that we've got so many new recruits in the force, that those vetting procedures are rigorous, and what you're doing to assure yourself that this critical piece of work to maintain public trust in the police and maintain the reputation of the vast majority of officers that are working to serve their community.
So just my recollection that the 43, I missed what you said, 43 investigated for?
It was a variety of things. So I have the article here. 46 police officers working in Cambridgeshire have been investigated for misconduct over the last 7 years. 20 officers were investigated for sexual misconduct. These are investigations, not charges. 24 officers were investigated for domestic abuse offences. And then it goes on to say that there were a number of people who were 9 officers were subject to disciplinary proceedings and 3 were subject to management action. 28 allegations resulted in no further action, so they're allegations as opposed to charges.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Clearly, I mean, I won't comment on individual cases, and obviously there is due process there as well, because you're right to point out that those are allegations, and with anybody who is accused or investigated for criminal offences, innocent until proven guilty. So there needs to be a robust mechanism. So, and firstly, what is my role in this? What is holding the Chief Constable to account? So there are those formal processes, and I think we deal with that a little bit later in one of the papers here as well. Obviously through the Business Coordination Board and through those other boards as well. And then there's probably the more informal. We do have a Chief Constable in Nick Dean. This is really high up on his agenda, and I mentioned before that the Constabulary received an outstanding in relation to that trust conference, the ethical piece. So things like, without getting too tactical, vetting, there's been some significant improvement in vettings, and so there should have been when we see that national report on some vetting failures. So there is a vastly improved vetting procedure, and of course re-vetting, which is probably the most important part as well. And then within the procedures as well of the complaints process, it's a pretty well-trodden path now, with it actually coming to the Police and Crime Commissioner for a formal review as well. So if people aren't happy with the way the police have dealt with their complaint, then it gets reviewed by my office. And then, of course, you also have the independent office of police conduct as well, an independent body who will look at these as well. So I think, and we do talk about this a little bit later as well, I think we have good mechanisms. I think my office has good mechanisms for holding the constabulary to account. We, both formally and informally, get updated with numbers of officers and what's going on, particularly if there are specific events. And just one other area that I'd like to mention as well that we are looking at very closely at the moment is pension forfeiture. So if, and this is my view, particularly as an ex-police officer, if you abuse your position of trust as a police officer, get a criminal conviction, in certain cases you should lose your pension as well, particularly the part that's been paid for by the general public. So we are looking at the moment to do just that. But I would just end by saying, in my experience, and both as a police officer and now dealing with the police, yes, things have changed, but the vast majority of our police officers do a fantastic job for all the right reasons and are ethical and honest in the way they go about it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. Part of the reason why I asked this question is that I know that the vast majority of the police officer deserve the respect and the confidence that the public shows in them. And I just wanted to be sure that we have procedures in place to protect their reputation and to protect the public against the small minority of people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Liming. And if I can just say, for the record, Councillor Anna Smith emailed in 2 questions at lunchtime today because she was unable to come. One of those has just covered, was exactly the same really as yours, and that response has covered that first question from Councillor Smith. Okay, are there any further questions? Oh, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Claire. I've got a couple of questions and a couple of points, but thank you for the report, Commissioner, and congratulations on seeing you back here again. I was going to ask a question about the rising violent crime, etc., but I think you've answered that in your summing up, so I won't go there. The other one I was going to touch on before the 2 questions is around 101 and cross-border. I'm thinking of Suffolk, and because I moved 2 miles 2 months ago, and my house is in Cambridgeshire. The road outside my house is in Suffolk. I'm that close to the border, so there are a lot of issues down in my patch in southeast Cambridgeshire where, as to who responds, but I won't, you know. So it's a tricky one. But going on to the 2 questions, one is around robust enforcement, and again. I'm trying not to be operational. We've had an issue in the last few days around in my patch and a bit further across with traveller encampments, and almost people. I represent 11 villages on the county council, and sort of trying to make sure that the encampments don't get on to various bits of land. I know, obviously, you've got to follow the law, and that at times probably doesn't help you. But I'd heard stories that, or one comment that on one of them, that the police had actually said to residents who were trying to stop caravans getting onto a land that if you carry on stopping them, we will arrest you. So, is that something you could take up with the Chief Constable in terms of how we, it's a very emotive, a very volatile situation. So that's the first one. And the second one, going on to rural crime, is you mentioned rural crimes come down, hair coursing, etc. One of the, again, if you could take up with the Chief Constable, so I'm aware certainly of 2 instances where large amounts of farm machinery has been stolen. They've then left it a few months, the insurance company's replaced it, and they've gone back. This is organised crime, you know, obviously. So I'd be interested if it's something that the Chief Constable's got on his radar, because obviously I'm sure it's probably similar gangs. If we can get rid of one of those gangs, then that would probably cut that sort of crime by quite a substantial amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In relation to your first point, I am completely aware of the significant impact that this can have on our communities. It won't be lost on any of us. It is a challenging area, and it's a challenging area of policing, and it's challenging for the local authority. But we do have new legislation. My job is to hold the Chief Constable to account for effectiveness and efficiency, and I would expect the constabulary to use that new legislation when appropriate to do so. And what I would say around that new legislation, because I'm often told, well, we've got new laws, so why don't the police do this, that or the other? I'm afraid it's not as straightforward as that, because there are lines in there like significant disruption, etc. So it's not just a case of if there's an unlawful encampment on land, then the police can go and arrest them. I'm afraid that's just not the case. In relation to the specific recent events, particularly in your patch, I have asked for an update from the Chief Constable. I have seen these comments as well. I'm very careful, always have been. I go on facts, not on what's been necessarily reported. So I have asked a report from the Chief Constable, and if I feel that they haven't done what they should be doing, I should be making strong representations to the Chief Constable on that. In relation to rural crime, agricultural machinery, yeah, that's absolutely organised criminality. We're talking about massive values, aren't we? Interestingly, and I didn't mention this earlier, after finishing on a high, talking about the decrease in crime, an area of concern is an increase in crime is theft of motor vehicles, theft of vehicles. And although quite a big proportion of that is motorcycles and mopeds, that doesn't mean it's any less significant, but that is a case. We have seen organised criminality. You may have heard about certain 4x4s being stolen. And I had an update recently on this. I mean, these criminals are going to extraordinary. I mean, the technology that they're using, and they're doing this quicker than the major manufacturers. And I think there is a will, because we spoke recently to the managing director of Land Rover. They're doing everything they can, but the criminals are doing it as well, because it's high value, and that's exactly the same with agricultural machinery. That's organised criminality. I think also we do have the National Rural Crime Network. I know that they are lobbying quite hard in relation to this. But once again, I would say that this isn't something the police can arrest their way out of. I don't know where we are at the moment, but traditionally manufacturers of agricultural machinery haven't really helped very much. With single key tractors, with sat-navs that can get stolen worth 10 grand a pop. I'm thinking, if you can't trace a sat-nav, so I think there is work to be done with manufacturers in this as well. But I take your point, and it's an area, particularly here in Cambridgeshire, I think we suffer probably second worst in the country for agricultural theft behind Lincolnshire, not least of which because of the high value machinery that we have in our great county because of the agricultural economy. But it's certainly on my radar and will feature in my police and crime plan.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, if there are no further questions then, I'd like the panel to note the report. I believe we've reviewed this, and unless there are any objections, the panel will accept this report. Thank you. I don't note any objections, so the panel will accept the report. Thank you. Let me just move that on. Right, we'll now move to agenda item number 9, Annual Integrity Assurance Report for 23-24. Commissioner, would you like to present your report?
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report, and this is around assurance. It's about the mechanisms in place for holding the constabulary to account, and some of those mechanisms that are directly commissioned through the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. You've had the report in front of you, and hopefully it's been helpful. I reflect, we gave this report to our Joint Audit Committee yesterday as well, so we had a lengthy conversation around it. I think one of their concerns was how do we know that we're using our resources, and there is so much going on in this space, and we know the constabulary has been noted as outstanding. Are we confident that there's no overlap, etc.? And interestingly, the very senior police officer would say they're absolutely confident, because particularly some of the scrutiny panels, it's the same people, but they're wearing different hats as well. So a very quick walkthrough. We talked about some of those mechanisms in an earlier question. So we have the Professional Standards Department. That's a collaborated unit within BCH. That's irrelevant because I hold my Chief Constable to account. They have a strategic scrutiny panel, and that enables internal and external stakeholders, importantly, to support and challenge them on performance. So Professional Standards Department, PSD, that is the body that will investigate those complaints where there's an element of misconduct or criminality. They will investigate. Not always. Sometimes it will be the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Complaints, and their remit is more around when there's a significant confidence issue, like deaths in custody, fatal road traffic collisions, etc. Worthy to note, coming back to am I assured, some time ago now, and I won't give exact figures, there was some investment, significant investment in PSD, and actually that formed part of the precept from memory as well. So we, that was an ask of the public, knowing that actually this is a really important area. So in relation to professional standards, I hold the Chief Constable to account in relation to them both formally and informally, and that would be through the formal channels of the Business Coordination Board. The Constables also launched a hate crime scrutiny panel, and my team are fully engaged with this. I think we all understand that we are particularly at the moment with recent events, it is really important that we are talking to and dealing with all our communities. And of course, hate crime, it's interesting when people talk about hate crime, actually, there is no such individual crime as hate crime. There are some crimes that are racially aggravated, but this is crime. It's crime normally with an impact on some of the most vulnerable people in our communities as well. So I'm glad that the constabulary are doing all they can in that particular area. Also, my office attends the constabulary's trust, confidence and legitimacy meetings. Going back to the earlier comments, you know, the constabulary was the first in the country to have a culture statement. And I could be a bit sceptical, so you have a statement, so what? But actually that statement is checked against practically everything that they do in policing, so I think that's really useful and has seen dividends as well. I've talked about the culture statement. We have an outsourcing of the complaint review process, and that's to an independent service provider. Jack could no doubt give any more detail on that if necessary. And of course, the HMIC FRS peel inspections, which there is a report on following as well. So that's a really useful tool for me. And actually, when I say I welcome this inspection, even when it's actually showing areas of significant improvement, I truly do, because that's a real deep dive into operational matters, which I can then use to hold the Chief Constable to account. So, Chair, I will leave it there. Any questions, myself or the team, very happy to take them.
Sorry, I was reading. Any questions? Councillor Branham.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually perhaps a more general point, and I can reiterate at the end of the meeting if you prefer. I sit on the Combined Authority Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and we've just been discussing the fact that if any report comes to us just to note, that's not very useful. Because actually what we want to be able to do is note and discuss and comment and maybe amend reports before they go back to a subsequent consideration or a decision. And I just wonder, it's a general point, you know, here at item 2.1, this panel is recommended to note the contents of this report. So you could say, what's the point of us being here? So, can we, I'm not saying for now, but in future, can we make our recommendations for what we should be doing as a panel with these reports more useful to the Police and Crime Commissioner? I know sometimes there isn't time to take on board any amendments that we might suggest, and sometimes we don't make any amendments, but I think it would be useful for us to understand, as Jack described to us at the beginning, our function is to call the Police and Crime Commissioner to account, and if we feel there are things that need to be improved, that we actually bring them through the panel to the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I think we need to think about this wording in the recommendations, if that would be possible. I'm not saying do it now, but maybe it's an action point for a later meeting.
We can certainly have a discussion about that. Yeah. Okay, any other questions about this particular report? Okay, so if there are no other questions then, and no further objections, I'd like to recommend to the panel then that we accept this report. Any objections? No? Thank you. Okay, we now move to item number 10. A new brand for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Darryl, Commissioner, would you like to present this?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I thought we'd gone on to item 11, but you're quite right.
Sorry
as usual.
about
We are, no, you're right, I'm wrong. A new brand. Actually, Councillor Branham's point that was just made, I have a lot of sympathy for that. And this isn't about noting, this is about making recommendations, adding value. And the reason I say that is that actually this next agenda item, I recall, it was a panel member that wasn't with us who commented on our brand and styling for the police and crime. I think he said it's very blue. It just so happened that particular councillor liked blue, but said, although I like blue, it's very blue. And I agreed entirely. So, Chair and panel members, I inherited at the beginning of my tenure the office logo, which you'll recall, and I think it's probably still on these papers, it's very policey. It's a police crown and just looks like the police, which of course I am not. Very, very separate function. And so quite early on, I asked what we could do about that in changing both that and the branding of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I spoke with Catherine from our comms team, and I think we got to a point, and I know that you haven't seen it, it's a bit of a shame because we've got a great big massive thing, but we were unable to bring it today. So Catherine will show you, we'll pass it around, we'll get it out there, we'll show it to you. But the way we went about this, I'm really, really proud of. But rather than me take all the credit, because I can't, because I asked Catherine to do it, and it was her drive and passion. Can I just ask Catherine just to take us through how we got to where we are?
Catherine.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair. So Darryl tasked me with this mission of changing the brand about 18 months ago. And what I thought we would take the opportunity to increase our engagement with young people. You're probably aware that the Commissioner spends a lot of time visiting schools and colleges, various different courses that we do very well in our counties, such as criminology and forensic science. However, we also can boast a very good graphic design department within Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge. So we came up with the concept that we would invest some time and resources into the university and help the students there with their employability. So it would be an opportunity for us to spread the awareness of the role of the Commissioner, also to engage with young people, but to get their buy-in and their understanding of what we do as an office. So I was very fortunate that I pitched up with the head of graphic design in December and got a massive thumbs up for this project. They put a lot of time and investment in it themselves. They have something called a live brief project within Anglia Ruskin, which is a great opportunity for their students to have a real life experience in a business world, in a corporate world. So they've often done logos you may have seen for different retail outlets and garages and hotels and things, but we were the first public sector brand live brief. So, and of course, what we do as an office is quite complicated and very difficult for young people to understand. So with a bit of support from myself and their lecturing staff, we spent 12 weeks between Christmas and March this year looking at what we do, looking at what we want to represent, and also what sort of brand would resonate with communities and which would work better. Darryl's already outlined the problems with the existing logo. What we wanted to get a sense across is of integrity, trust and confidence in what we do as an office and how we hold the Chief Constable to account, but also to bring communities together and to give them that sort of sense that they're an asset in their own right, that they can feed into all of this community safety debate. So if you see, sorry, I do have something larger, but I've passed around a little frame for you to see. The idea that the student came up with, which I think is genius, is the rivers, the rural community and the countryside of our county in very sort of neutral colours, very friendly, warm colours, which give a sense of community, and that hence leads to trustworthiness. These, I have to say, were second-year students from very diverse backgrounds, a lot from other countries that don't know our police. They did a hell of a lot of research. They did a great job. And Darryl, I think you had a real problem choosing the winner, didn't you? We had 20 designs. Any of the top 5 would have worked. So the vision was there. The good thing is at least 2 of those students have gone on to do other commissioning, even in their second year. So for their CVs, it's a great opportunity. For us, it's been a great opportunity to raise awareness. And I think I'll leave it there. I mean, we are in the process of moving everything over. On the little frame that's going around, you'll see some of the other designs that Faria came up with. And of course, of interest to everybody here is that this cost nothing to the public purse. So if you put out a project like this to tender, you're going to be spending thousands of pounds. And we did this for an Amazon voucher. So there we are. Any questions at all?
No, just before on this, so yeah, my thanks to Farrier Actor, who is the eventual winner. I'll be perfectly blunt. When Catherine mentioned this to me, I was a little bit worried that we would not get anything that was suitable, and how are we going to tell them that we're not going to use it? But we did. We got 20, and any one of them could have been used, in my opinion. So really fantastic piece of work in my view.
Councillor Branham.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Catherine, for the presentation. To two things. I was just looking at the board that went round, and I just wanted to check, what is the font size of the wording that says Office of Police and Crime Commissioner underneath the logo? Because on the board it looked so tiny it was almost unreadable, and I hope it's bigger than that in the version that's being used. And the second thing is, can we see it somewhere? Is it on the website now? Or how soon will it be on the website, if not yet?
So thank you, Councillor Braddon. Very good questions, and accessibility was a key part of the brief. So I can just reassure you that the wording underneath is the accessible font that we put in the brief. We are slowly moving over all of our collateral. The website, because it's a nationally run website, we're just waiting for a ticket to go through, but that should happen very soon. All the social media platforms have been updated, the newsletter's been updated, so we're making good progress. Thank you.
And one other practical point is it's different to, thank you, but quite similar to the Combined Authority logo, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, which also has this circular appearance. So please, it's a different issue. Please, can we continue to flag all correspondence that comes from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and to us as a panel with OPCC or the Police and Crime Panel at the beginning? When we get emails, we get lots of emails, and it's really helpful if the first element of the wording is Police and Crime Panel, PCP, so that we know what emails we're looking at. It's a sort of identification of where the communication's coming from, and that's really for the admin staff and the DEM services staff who send us out emails. That's a slightly different issue, but it's related. Thank you.
I'm sure the current practice can continue, and actually the logo wouldn't impact on that at all, would it?
No, the logo wouldn't come into it. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions in terms of the new logo? Sir?
Not a question, but a comment. I'm pleased it was only an Amazon voucher. The Royal British Legion spent £50,000 at least on a logo, and it caused a lot of grief.
Well done, Catherine. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? In which case, then, our panel will receive and note the report. Thank you very much. I'll give you back your pictures in a second. Okay, we move to item number 11, which is an update around the police effectiveness, efficiency and legitimacy inspection, the Peel inspection. Commissioner, would you like to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And as previously mentioned, this was the result of an action and a recommendation from this board to come back and just give an update. I think it's important to note that the update itself isn't necessarily for me in relation to what the constabulary is doing. It's more to what I am doing to hold the Chief Constable to account. And I think we've already talked a lot about that in previous agenda items as well. I think it's reasonable, having said that there are statutory responsibilities both for the Chief Constable and myself. I have to respond to HMIC FRS as well. But I think it's important just for this panel just to understand what those two areas were and maybe a little bit of background around these Peel assessments as well. Probably 2 or 3 years ago, the Peel assessments changed, and they changed significantly. And HMIC made this common knowledge as well. Whereas we had lots of goods, outstandings, and a few forces who weren't doing very well, we have seen those gradings shift incredibly. And that's probably as a result of the new leadership of the Chief inspector there as well, but they have shifted significantly. So although it was really disappointing to see those areas that you know required improvement, not least of which, you know, responding to the public. I'm disappointed on behalf of the public. That's the main reason. It was disappointing, but there were still some, you know, positive areas within that report as well. And actually put against our similar family of forces, we actually didn't do too bad, believe it or not. And there's still a number of forces in special measures as well. I'm really, so they took one of the areas, I think, was the constabulary just taking their eye off the ball. And this was around management of sex offenders. I am absolutely reassured now and had conversations that everything is now in place and any risk to the public has been completely dealt with in relation to those recommendations. So really grateful for HMIC in picking that up. The other one was more concerning for me in relation to what could be done to improve that responding to the public. I think it's useful, and I am getting into the operational bit now, but I think it's important just to point out one area. So say I appreciate the inspection and the recommendations, which I fully accept, and you've got within the papers a fuller brief from the Chief Constable as to what they're doing around those recommendations as well. And I'm certainly not going to defend the constabulary when it comes to some of those areas of you know, answering 999 calls and even 101 calls, as we mentioned earlier. But one area that the constabulary did not very well on was the response time to 39s. And it was interesting when I dug a bit deeper on this, the constabulary have themselves placed a target of 15 minutes. So Cambridgeshire Constabulary said, we will go to 999 calls in 15 minutes. And at the time of report, I think, you know, they're probably only hitting 50%. I know, and I won't give that figure because I don't think it's publicly available yet, having spoken to the Chief on Friday, we are now in a much, much better position on hitting those 999 calls. But having spoken with the Chief Constable, I'm not really sure what that tells us. A 15-minute arbitrary response time, not least of which anyone of you that knows the geography of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, you know, in itself, that's quite a significant achievement to be able to get anywhere within 15 minutes. And I think probably they need to have a look at that response time. And I think nationally, there's an issue here. It needs to be cleverer than just saying we're going to go to 39 calls within 15 minutes. Because I know, having been in the police, there will be a 39 call and an immediate response to a crime in action. That crime in action could be something which isn't in any way life-threatening or high harm or high risk, but the police will still go there and try and get there as quickly as possible. And then you get those incidents that really, really do need the police there as quick as possible. And I don't think nationally we've got that right. If you look at the ambulance service, they've got completely different gradings. And although they get a hard time, you know, having recently used them in a family myself, when it really, really matters, you know, they tend to get there really quickly. And that's what you'd want the police to do as well. So I think there's a bit of work there. So I think there's been some real progress. There was one other, you'll be aware that outside of this recent PIL assessment, there was a standalone assessment of serious and organised crime, where the constabulary were graded that they needed to improve. The HMIC have now come back, because they do that when they say that there's a deficiency, and they've said everything is much, much better. You're out of our scope now. So that's really positive as well. And that letter from the HMIC saying that the constabulary have addressed all the recommendations is on my website. So, Chair, I'll stop there. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Really glad to hear that you're taking on board these areas of improvement seriously. I wanted to ask you about, just as a matter of interest, it's quite, I don't know if it's just me, I'm finding it quite difficult to make any comment on the PIL report, because it opens in a link which doesn't put it into a format where I can take notes on it. So that's just inconvenient, and I'm just wondering whether we can actually, instead of having a link, can we have the report available to us? But anyway, that's a different thing. The area I wanted to look at was leadership and force management. which required improvement. And there's a lot of narrative there, but one of the things that concerned me is because it concerns me because I sit on the Children and Young People's Committee, and also I chair the Corporate Parenting Subcommittee as County Councillor. I'll just read you it. It's in the first page of that drop-down. And an area of improvement was the constabulary should make sure it can scrutinise poor performance in its demand hub, management of sexual offenders and violent offenders, and paedophile online investigation team. And it says that in July 2023, we found that the paedophile online investigation team had large backlogs. This meant that it had many children in need of safeguarding. And so the response is that the paedophile online investigation team is now completing work to reduce backlogs, but after this work is complete, it must make sure it has a good sense of its current and future demand. So what I'm concerned about is, do you have a sufficient and adequate data system to link up the areas where you've got concerns about children at risk of paedophile behaviour, but also that might link to relationships to drug gangs and vulnerability to knife crime and all that, you know, those are all. And I expect the answer is no, you haven't got that. But are there ways that you're seeking to improve that information and that data gathering and making sure you can look across the fields?
So there's a couple of bits there for me. I mean, obviously, operational with some of it, the way that I would do it is obviously in holding the Chief Constable to account at a strategic level in relation to the provision of the service. And we do that regularly. Having said that, this is a particular area of interest to me, not least of which my background was child abuse investigation, running online teams and management of sex offenders, etc. I think the point you're getting to is that risk and the significant risk. Have we got backlogs? Therefore, is there a risk to children out there? Yeah, I am reassured we have a multi-agency safeguarding hub, and any of those sort of reports that come in are triaged and assessed. So those where there will be children at risk will be prioritised. Although this is operational, I know that they will be prioritised, and that there are mechanisms in place. And data, I think, is shared far better than it ever was between those agencies, and actually it's a legal requirement. Is it perfect? I still don't think we're probably in the best position. I reflect on, and not unrelated, the hospital admissions data that I gave you earlier. Some of it is difficult because it's, and I'm not a brilliant data analytical sort of person. I know that some in this room that might be, but some of it is not actually that they don't have the data, it's being able to access and understand and interpret the data because all the agencies hold it in different ways and styles. That hospital data was a really interesting one. It took a little while to get that. Why? You know, so, well, you know, it needs to be anonymised. Yeah, happily. You know, but it could identify someone. How can it identify someone? You know, it's just the same silly old discussions. But what we're trying to do is actually protect people, and particularly, you know, vulnerable people as well. So I think if your question is, are the constabulary identifying risk? I think they are. This was more about the wider systems and processes which the Chief Constable is addressing.
It also, if I may clarify, it related to, let's put this in the proper phraseology. Are you satisfied that the data systems you have give you the information that you need in order to deal with this integrated crime risk?
I think that's one for the Chief Constable. In my conversations with him, I think particularly in relation to these types of offences, I think we have multi-agency joined up data sharing systems. I'll reflect on that question and come back to you, and I will go back and ask that question of the Chief Constable once again.
And if I could just make a comment from a practitioner point of view, having worked on the front line in that particular field, there are a range of risk management activities, information gathering, data sharing activities that go on a very, very regular basis, looking at our most vulnerable young people and those that are at most risk and potentially presenting most risk as well. So there's an awful lot of other work going on in the background around that particular cohort of young people. Any further questions? Councillor Leaming.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. I would like to ask the Police and Crime Commissioner about the practicalities of how we're responding, how the force and you are ensuring that the force responds to this report. So, will the inspectors come back and report again? Do you have an action plan of, broken down of which particular pieces of work you'll be doing at which time? When I say you, I mean are you ensuring that the Chief Constable has such a plan and overseeing that is upheld, please? I'm just sort of wondering, because I should imagine that some of the issues that have been raised in this will be fairly quick fixes and some will take a lot longer to work on. And I wondered what the timescale was that you envisioned having to oversee this work. Thank you.
So the Chief Constable certainly has a plan, which I have seen, and I think some of it is reported on in this papers as well. Ultimately, this is his school report. And they will take it, very, very personally, as they should, and those particular areas that have been highlighted, there is an awful lot of activity to address them. I'm not sure when the inspectors come back. Do you know, Jack, or we take that away? In the areas where it requires improvement, there's almost constant monitoring. It's not that you're in special measures or anything, but there will be monitoring. But I think it's normally fairly soon, the first visit.
Just in relation to some of the actions that you're talking about there, there's a business assurance meeting which was mentioned in the earlier paper, and that's where all the actions and recommendations are monitored through. And I actually attend that meeting to provide the necessary assurance to the Commissioner that the actions are being progressed, and we get an update on those actions around that. Obviously, there's further information provided to the HMRC FRS as we start to deliver on those actions, and that's provided into the constabulary. The peel assessments are a programme of inspections, and the next peel assessment will be taken after the 25 period. So in essence that, but we do provide updates to the constabulary provide updates to HMRC FRS on the progress of those actions and whether they've been achieved or not achieved.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether we could ask for a sort of regular report on this, not every single meeting, but an update so that we can understand your work in overseeing how this has been implemented. Thank you.
So, yeah, certainly we'll take that away. It's an important area, and I think there should be a lot of transparency around it in any case from the constabulary, so very happy to do that. Just a couple of other things, because I think they are in the paper. I have regular meetings with the regional head inspector of constabulary as well, and they're very useful. That's where I get to ask, is my chief really doing what I should be doing as well? And I think that's a pretty good relationship that we have.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, just in relation to some of the updates, obviously the Commissioner holds a business coordination board, and the minutes of those are published on the Commissioner's website, and that includes updates in relation to the peel assessment and progress on that. But I'll send information through.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. And just for the record, the two other questions that were emailed from Councillor Anna Smith have been completely covered in that question and your responses. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions in relation to this particular item? No? Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, we would like then for the panel to note the report. Thank you, Pippa. Okay, that concludes the part of the business that requires your presence, Commissioner, and your staff team, so you are free to go should you wish to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Catherine, I've got your logo here. Okay, so we'll move to item 12 then, everybody. Police and Crime Panel Forward Plan. So I think on the bottom here we've got dates and... I'm just going to put the paperwork in the right direction. So dates are duly noted, and we have an overview of some of the items to be addressed at that particular meeting. For new members, what we tend to do is have an online briefing session probably 4 to 6 weeks before the meeting, where we might talk about the reports or the items that the Commissioner's Office are intending to bring, and have an opportunity there, like Councillor Bradman was suggesting, to ask any of the particular questions, or if there's a particular area of interest that we would like covered and reported back in under a particular theme, then obviously there's an opportunity to do that. I think it's fair to say in the past, Pippa, the meeting in November, we've had a presentation around the Commissioner's approach to grants and commissioning, and one around finance, so that we really clearly understand what the issues are before we get into the nitty-gritty of the finance meeting in February. But if there are other areas of work that people are interested in, if there's something that you'd like a theme pulled out, then please, say. And we can ask the Commissioner's Office to do something particular if that's what you'd like. Okay, if you have any thoughts, let me know or let Pippa know, that would be fine. Yes?
Thank you. So are we saying that we're going to need some dates, so some time before the 25th of September for an online briefing, and how soon will those dates come out?
That is what we've done in the past, but I think probably, can you have a conversation with Jack and get some outline of date? We would normally do them about 4 or 5 weeks beforehand to give us a chance to ask questions, and then them to prepare responses and include them in reports. Yeah, so we'll do that and circulate those as soon as we can.
Okay, and a further admin-y type thing is just early on when we were arriving today, members were realising, I had realised that I had forgotten that I could have parked in the car park, whichever way it is, that way or that way.
Could we just hold that? Could we just hold that for a second? If we could just do if there's any other around the forward plan, I think we'll do a sort of any other business afterwards, and we capture those practical things there. Has anybody got any other questions or comments in terms of forward plan? No? Okay, thank you very much. If you do think of anything, let me or let Pippa know, and we'll include them. Okay, so if we have a sort of informal any other business.
Yes, sorry. Could we be reminded of how to...
Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, yes, sorry. Could we stop the live stream, please? Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
So could we just have a reminder of how we claim expenses and where we can park, please? Absolutely.
So our lovely Pippa is going to be the lady that will receive our